Wednesday. This is TSR, joined once again by Pierre and MacGuire. Pierre, the offseason continues to roll. A little bit quiet on the Western Front right now, but we know the Leafs and the league broadly are not done making changes. Let's start today. Have you review some potential landing places for Morgan Riley, because the rumor mill still insists that his time as a Toronto Maple Leaf is coming to an end.
I've heard the same thing you have, Kyle. So obviously, there are a lot of people talking about Morgan Riley and with a potential for him to move on. San Jose would seem like a place that's trying to make a playoff push. Obviously, with Macklin Celebrini, with Will Smith, some of the other moves they've made. They've got a young defenseman in Sam Dickinson, who I know they're really excited about. So they've done some things. They've tried to add to the defensive depth. I mean, Morgan Riley brings a plethora of depth, and not only that, but leadership as well, a lot of experience. So I could see San Jose being a likely landing spot. I don't know about the Edmonton Oilers, but I think they have to be in the conversation only because if you look at their organizational depth chart, that's one of the places where they're a little bit lean is on the back end. And clearly they're not in it just to make the playoffs. They're in it to try to win it. And they don't have enough right now to do that. And then finally, people talk about Vancouver. I just don't know budgetarily if Vancouver can pull something like that off right now. You know, they're on the record now saying ownership wants to cut almost $20 million worth of payroll. I've been talking to you about this for a long time. I've been talking to a lot of other shows about this for a long time. Everybody talks about the salary cap going up. I can tell you right now, there are a lot of owners that don't know where all this money's coming from for the cap to go up, and they don't want to even go close to it. They're going to have a lot of internal caps, a lot of these teams.
Yeah, and you hear Anaheim mentioned too, but they don't have the cap space to get this done. And you have to
No.
feel as though the Leafs right now, priority one on this deal is for the other team to eat all of that salary and then
Mhm.
get back, a 27, a 28 pick, something, almost a token gesture, really, to receive something from them. But getting rid of that salary and freeing up the cap space has got to be priority one for this Leafs team.
Agreed, 100%. And that's obviously what they're looking to. They're trying to clean out whatever that's in their cabinet right now to have an opportunity to make some moves later on in the season. I do think, though, and I'm not saying this because I'm on Toronto Sports Rush right now, but the truth of the matter is, I think the Leafs have been one of the more formidable teams this offseason. They really have been.
There's no doubt about that, Pierre. And like speaking of that, I want you to kind of talk us around the Eastern Conference a little bit here and mention some of the other teams that have also made moves that make them, at least on paper, a better team going into next season, because there has been quite a bit of shifting.
Yeah, Florida Panthers. We'll just start with getting Brady Kachuk. They've made other moves too. Obviously, losing Bobrovsky's not going to help them, but they brought in Markstrom from New Jersey, somebody that was originally drafted by them. I think they've made a big difference in terms of improving their team from last year, where they were a non-playoff team. I look at, and they're going to get Barkov back, and they're going to get Lundell back. So those are players that they didn't have last year because of injury. So they're going to be a lot better. I think Tampa Bay has made their team better, and they're going to have a healthy Victor Hedman. That's going to make a big difference for them. They're going to have a healthy Braden Point. So I think that they've actually made their team better. I look at the Buffalo Sabres, and I think this neighborhood, the Atlantic Division, is so darn difficult. Florida, Tampa, Buffalo, and Montreal is still working on getting a second center. I think they've improved their coaching staff by bringing in Derek Lalonde. He's going to tactically help Marty St. Louis, which I think is a good thing. If there's one, I don't know where Boston's at right now. Honestly, I don't know what their organizational identity is. It reminds me a lot of Seattle in the West. And Ottawa has taken a step backwards. I don't know how big a step back, but Ottawa's clearly taken a step back. And I don't know how they're going to overcome some of those offensive situations that Brady put them in that were very positive.
Yeah, it's tricky, but like as you say, with this Atlantic and just the Eastern Conference as a whole, this is a tough conference. That's a tough
Mhm.
division, and it was inevitable that the Leafs had to make the level of moves and the level of roster changeover simply to keep pace with this, because they fell so far off the pace. Just getting back to that level of competition was priority one for this team, and we haven't seen them skate, but they've certainly seemed to have put in the effort to make that the case. But speaking of this roster turnover in this Leafs team, it's massive. They have a whole new identity, or they're at least shifting to that. But what is a realistic time frame for a team with this much turnover to actually hit stride and show the sum of the parts on the ice?
It depends a lot on how training camp goes. Honestly, I'm not going to mess around with you. If training camp goes well and everybody buys into the message from Jim Hiller and his staff, I think it can turn right away. if there's growing pains, I think you're probably looking at US Thanksgiving as being a real marketing position for the team. Yeah, we like our team, or no, we don't like our team. And US Thanksgiving is probably the cutoff date. If you like your team, you're not doing much. If you don't like your team, you're getting proactive because you're not going to have a lot of wiggle room the rest of the year. Remember, it's an 84 game schedule this year, not 82. We're starting in September, not in October. So there are lots of different variables. But I would say if they have a good camp, and everybody's buying into what the coach is selling, I don't see why this team can't run right out of the blocks at full speed. I really don't.
Well, if it just so happens that it isn't till around American Thanksgiving, luckily for the Toronto Maple Leafs, they have one of the most patient fan bases, and I'm sure they'll be happy to sit back and wait for that to take shape. But I only bring that up sarcastically, Pierre, because that is a part of this reshaping and understanding that we got to satiate this fan base quickly because they were not a happy group,
No.
fairly not a happy group all of last season, and it's one thing to change over a roster, but to hope that you've put in the coaching staff, the management staff, and then, of course, the roster pieces to make that a reality quickly. It's somewhat a roll of a dice.
It is, no, there's no question about it. But here's where I think they're better in goal. They're deeper in goal, so that's a
Mhm.
positive. I think they're better on defense. I think they're deeper on defense. Now, if Kanev can stay healthy, that's a huge piece of news for
Yes.
them. And if Jake McCabe can have the same kind of season this year as he had last year, I think that really helps. And I think a lot of people overlook the fact that Oliver Ekman Larson's a very important part of this team. He's still there. So that's not counting on, Darren Radish, and that's not counting on Emil Andre. There are other guys that have been brought into the mix that are going to make this defense better. So I'm really encouraged by where they are. And up front, their depth down the middle. I've talked about it with you before, Kyle. You go Austin Matthews, you go John Tavares, you go Nicky Paul, and you go Teddy Bluger, or you go Colton Sissons. That 1, 2, 3, 4 down the middle, there people in the East are going to have a hard time matching up with
Yeah.
that if everybody stays healthy. That's a huge component in terms of winning.
Yeah, it is, Pierre. Like that center depth matters so much in their
Mhm.
ability to eat up minutes productively for this hockey team. They just simply didn't have that last season, and these holes that they've now, at least theoretically, and I say that exact word a lot because we haven't seen them play together. If those are in fact filled, it takes so much pressure off the top end of this roster, off those top two lines, off those top two defensive pairings, and of course off the netminders.
No question. Here's one other thing. They had the first overall pick. Last year, the New York Islanders had the first overall pick. We saw the impact that Matthew Schaefer had,
Mhm.
obviously, on the New York Islanders. It was a dramatic impact that he had on the team. I think Gavin McKenna can have the same kind of impact, but up front. It's a different position, obviously. But he's surrounded with better players in Toronto than what you saw from Matthew Schaefer with the Islanders. This is something that's really important. I saw Jaromir Jagr break into the National Hockey League, and there were growth problems early on. And part of that was there was a language barrier. Well, Craig Patrick, in his infinite wisdom, and Bob Johnson said, we need somebody in here to translate for him so he understands the whole thing. They brought in Yuri Herdina, who had won a Stanley Cup in Calgary in 1989. They brought him in 1990 to help Yarmer get through all the trials and tribulations of being an 18-year-old in the NHL. Toronto doesn't have to worry about that. There's no language barrier. And I'm not saying Gavin McKenna is as
Yeah.
good as Yarmer Yager. He's really talented, but you're surrounded with Austin Matthews. You're surrounded with John Tavares. You are surrounded by Jake McCabe. You're surrounded by really good people that know how to lead. I'm telling you right now, this kid's transition to the National Hockey League is going to be a lot easier than most young players that go first overall.
Yeah, and I want to stick with that thought for a moment here, Pierre, simply because, okay, whether this works out this way or not, he is poised as a generational level talent. And
Mhm,
if you go
mhm.
back to someone like, say, Connor Bedard, who had the same level of pressure on him coming into the NHL, he came into the NHL and he was functionally the best player of the best member of the Chicago Blackhawks immediately just by talent. Gavin McKenna does not have that pressure. He is neither the number one nor number two offensive threat on this team, probably for some time, because you've got Austin Matthews, who's one of the best Leafs ever to play, one of the
Mhm,
best players in the game. You
mhm.
got Willie Nylander, who's such a dynamic presence offensively out there. And then just behind him on talent level, you have someone who's done what a Tavares has done. So it's kind of a unique situation for a generational number one to come into the NHL, as you just alluded to. Walk me through the first 3 to 6 months of development in the NHL for a player like this.
Well, I think a lot of it starts this summer, and he's going through the trials and tribulations now in a good way, not a bad way. He's obviously practicing out west in Vancouver with a lot of real good high end players. That's going to help him a lot. So you come into camp in shape. That's number one. Number two, you come in with a clean mind in terms of there's no pollution between the ears. I think one of the really big things you just touched on it perfectly, Kyle. He's not gonna have the pressure that Connor Bedard had. He's not gonna have the
Exactly.
pressure that Matthew Schaefer had. Jaromir Jagr, and that's why I brought Jagr up. Jagr didn't have that same pressure because we had Mario Lemieux, we had Paul Coffey, we had ended up getting Ronnie Francis, we had Joey Mullen, Kevin Steve. We had a plethora of really good young players that were and older players that were around Jaromir. I see the same thing for Gavin McKenna. Here's the thing: we didn't have Matt Sundin, a first overall pick in our front office that we could go to and say, hey, you can take him out to dinner tonight talking about Jagr and, talk to him about what goes in and out of being a first overall pick in a high performance marketplace like Toronto is. Toronto's got Sundin. That's a huge advantage. That's
Right.
gigantic. And then the fact I really like the proactive maneuvering of bringing Daniel Alfredson in. I coached Alfie his rookie year when he was rookie of the year in the National Hockey League. And Daniel was just figuring it out, but he was such a good leader and he was so solid in terms of understanding the sport. He's going to help that kid a ton.
Mhm.
And I just think there's so much built up infrastructure around the player. I don't think it's going to be that hard for him to adjust to being a Toronto Maple Leaf and being a really good player.
Yeah, and it's not just that. It's that if you look at fundamentally the way he plays the game, he is a creator and an elite playmaker before he is an elite goal scorer. He has elite goal scorers around him, which he is in the perfect position to thrive with the style of hockey he's playing without having to change his game much, simply adapting to the larger men, the faster speed of the NHL.
This is such a good point. And again, Matthew Nyes needs to be better. He does. Easton
Yes.
Cowan, this is a big jump up for him. He's going to have an opportunity to really play. Willie Nylander had a really good year offensively. He needs to be much more consistent and be more of a leadership type of a guy. Tavares, we know what he is. He had a tremendous year last year. I don't think he's going to fall back at all. The insulation part of what you just said is so important. If this kid has any kind of a valley over the course of so many peaks, he's going to have some help to get out of the valley. They got enough people around him now that they can do that. And I just think he's going to be electrifying on the power play. The biggest thing for Toronto last year, depending on the night, they were anywhere from 15 to 22 in the league on the power play.
Mhm.
If they're not in the top 10 this year, I'll be absolutely shocked,
Same.
especially with the Darren Radish shot being added to the back end, the creativity of McKenna. I think with Austin Matthews being 100% healthy as long as he is, I have a hard time believing this team's not going to be a top 10 power play team in the league. And McKenna will be a big part of it.
And another to that point as well, Pierre, it's not just PP1, it's going to be PP2 for this team as well. And it's less pressure for that PP1 line to be on the ice for the entire 2 minutes because they should have a formidable front six available for the power play with this mix of players. And I would love to see Cowan and McKenna get some reps together, potentially that youth and speed and playmaking ability where possible on a power play. It could be a fun and exciting dynamic.
Yeah,
Okay.
youthful
Yeah.
enthusiasm matters a lot.
It does matter. It
It
does.
really does matter, especially when you got guys like Johnny T, who's a little bit older, Austin now 10 years into his career. Youthful enthusiasm matters, especially when you're starting a season early in September rather than in October. You added 2 more games to the schedule. I think enthusiasm is going to matter a lot, and youthful enthusiasm is very infectious.
Okay, Pierre, before I let you go, the Toronto Maple Leafs have, of course, added Chris Bork as an assistant
Yep.
general manager, and they've added a couple of more assistant coaches, Denver Manderson and Greg Moore, to the team. Any thoughts on these? What an incredible amount of turnover from the ice to the boardroom this offseason.
Yeah, no, they've done a good job. They've identified younger people that are growing in the game. I really admire that. Many moons ago, I was one of those people, so I understand exactly how excited those people are. I'm really happy for Christopher Bork. I've known him a long time. I've known his family for a long time. I know there was some consternation around the hockey world after Haley Wickenheiser got let go, that maybe there would be more people internally that would get let go. I know some people were worried about that for Christopher Bork. That didn't happen, which I'm happy about. He'll do a really good job. I think, gotta think most of his communication in terms of the chain of command is going to be from the American Hockey League to the NHL part of it. He had a tremendous career as an American Hockey League player. He really did. He had an outstanding American Hockey League career. He's a tremendous hockey man. I've known him a lot. Like I said, I've known him a long time. I think he'll do a great job. Greg Moore's been around coaching forever. He's going to do a real good job. I think the biggest thing people need to understand about where the new NHL is going, and because it is a new NHL, it definitely has changed. The unrestricted free agency out of college hockey in the United States is going to become bigger and bigger and bigger all the time because you're going to have a lot of major junior players that get drafted. They're going to go down to the United States as 18 or 19-year-olds. They're going to play, but they're not going to play maybe as well as what a lot of people expect. That's going to throw them back into the pool because the teams that draft them aren't going to sign them. And that's going to enhance the size of the player pool at the free agent level. That's why you have to have these bigger staffs right now to really understand how to be connected into college hockey in the States.
Thanks for that, Pierre. It's just such an interesting dynamic with this
Mm.
team and this amount of turnover to discuss this offseason. It's the anticipation to see what that product on the ice then looks like, whether it occurs before American Thanksgiving or not, it's a lot of fun to see, right? Because if you're a Toronto Maple Leaf supporter, if you're a fan, if you're on the fence after last season, it's worth hopping back in right now simply to see what happens here because you cannot fault this new leadership team for at least putting in the effort to make change in the city of Toronto.
I think you and I were really disappointed last year. I thought the season was going to start well. It didn't. I thought the season would start to pick up after the dismal start. It got worse, progressively worse. Injuries played a role in that. I think the messaging from the coaching staff to the players became a problem. Then there was a lack of trust with the front office. And Keith Pelly had no choice but to make a significant change. It's been big, it's been bold. I think it's been really proactive, and I think it's going to work. I really do. I do believe Toronto's one of the most improved teams in the National Hockey League this offseason.
I completely agree with you, Pierre, and I'm excited to see what the on ice product looks like. We'll be talking to you soon here on Toronto Sports Rush.
Thanks, Kyle.